Hey guys, Jeff here, and today I'm going to be teaching you guys my DIY basement framing system. We're going to go through all the tools, the materials, and the assemblies, and the differences in how you frame when you have open rim joists versus when they're closed at the other end of the building, to teach you all of the tips and tricks that help you move forward in your project without having to take steps back and constantly readdress issues because you didn't know how to frame the first time. Here we go, we got a tape measure. I got my laser level, I got a pencil and a marker, I got a knife, got my staple hammer, and I got my regular hammer with the sharp tooth on it. This is very important when you're DIY framing because lumber doesn't come straight. I'm also going to be using my 6-foot box beam level and my Ramset tool for powder actuated nailing bolts through the plate into the concrete. All right, my system is really simple. We assemble the walls on the floor, we do all the exterior walls first, and then we level and square everything off, then we attach it, and then you move on. Okay, so let's just jump right into it. Our wall assembly looks something like this. We have a rigid board with an R7.5. We're putting in a 2x4 frame. And the only thing that this frame is doing is supporting the electrical work. Building code when you're closing up your walls means you gotta have a plug every 10 feet. That requires the depth for the box. We also have an insulation requirement. So we have an R14 bat. The bat plus this gets above code of R20 for our basement wall assembly. It also gives us a complete thermal break around the building. When you combine a thermal break with the way I insulate my rim joists, you get a superior performance house without any drafts. If you wanna see how we do that, that was last week's video. Today we're moving forward. Let's just jump into how to measure a wall, because at the end of the day, you need a system. The system should be simple. I don't want you fighting with it. I don't want you using sledgehammers and risking destroying the house upstairs. Now, my actual height here is just a little over 89 inches, and then down here starts to get just a little bit tighter. Not a problem. What we're gonna do is we're gonna install our wall a little bit shorter than it needs to be, because we always attach our wall to our floor joists using screws, not nails, so we don't lift them up off the ground. That gives you the ability to make adjustments and get things square in order. On your measuring tape, you're gonna have these little red squares. Now this red square is every 16 inches. We wanna frame every 16 inches, because what that does, that finishes off at 8 feet. That's the length of the top and bottom plate. That's the length of your drywall. This gives you the ability to hang your drywall and always meet in the middle of a stud. And that is the key to success in these kind of scenarios. We're gonna just measure off our plate, count the red squares, and cut the number of studs that we need for this wall. 1 to start, 2, 3, 4, 13, 14, 1 in the end. So my son is gonna cut 14 pieces of lumber for me and give me a hand today. I've already got my material on the ground here for what I need. We've got pressure treated bottom plate, and then regular spruce for the top, some sill gasket that we picked up. And we're gonna show you our assembly. It's really simple. So what I'm gonna do right now is I'm gonna measure out my top and bottom plate, and I'm gonna identify every 16 on center. We do this. I'm using a marker so you can see it at home, and then we'll put an X on the side where the 2x4 goes. Now we start with 1, obviously. So if we start measure from the outside of the 2x4, we make a mark. That's the outside of that 2x4, and so on and so on. And then we just go down every one of these little black marks. Okay, so now we've got that marked out. Lay your bottom plate there, your top plate over here. And then we fill in the gap with all of the studs that we need, and then we start nailing it. Now, I'm gonna be using the Milwaukee framing nailer. And because I've got a pressure treated bottom plate, I'm going with all galvanized nails, because you need ACQ when you're dealing with pressure treated lumber, okay? Yeah, that is awesome. So first of all, if you don't wanna run out and spend 600 bucks on a framing nailer, you can get one for around $350 if you use a compressor. And these are Canadian dollars, right? It's cheaper in the States, obviously. But you can just go buy yourself an $80 box of nails. That's a 3.5-inch galvanized spiral nail. And the rule of thumb when you're framing is 1 nail for every 2 inches of lumber. So we call it a 2x4, even though it's not exactly 2 inches. So you need 2 nails, top and bottom. So what we do is we line it up, put some weight on the stick so it's not sliding across the floor. Not the fastest way in the world to frame, but if you want to save a few $100 and you're willing to put in the time, you can go with the regular nails. Galvanized is also ACQ, so it's good for the bottom plate. Let's get this done, and you'll be able to see the difference. And you don't want to group the nails too close together in the middle of the stud. Okay, like top third, bottom third. All these guns have 2 different functions on them. This one in particular, that's single shot. Okay, and that means that you have to press the safety tip, then pull the trigger to get 1 nail. If I pull the trigger and then hit the wall, nothing happens. But watch this, change the mode. Now you can pull the trigger And then every time that depresses, a nail comes out. Okay? That's faster. It's also dangerous. I recommend staying on one nail, one trigger pull. That way, even if you're tired and you're working late into the night trying to build your basement, you're not gonna put a nail into your leg or something if you have a little mishap, okay? Let's just get this going. It's very important to consider obstructions like doors and windows and all that sort of thing, because you're building a whole section of wall. You don't want to build it, lift it up, and then start cutting around with a Sawzall and reframing around a window. Incorporate all of that in your build, okay? Let's get this done. So here's where we go. The board is twisted. My hammer has a sharp tooth on it, and the design for this is it sits on your lumber, and then I can manipulate the board. So I can take the twist out of it, and then it'll sit back on that nail in a nice straight position. Okay, now one more thing I need on here before I can put my wall in is the sill gasket. All right guys, here's my sill gasket. It's kind of like corrugated cardboard almost in a way. And it's just designed to be a vapor barrier between your wood and your concrete. So let's just talk about the building science here for a minute. I have a dry basement, I said, okay? And minimum code allows me to install a wall on pressure-treated lumber directly on concrete with no plastic barrier. If you're gonna use all regular spruce, they want a plastic barrier. I think that's one of the dumbest things the building code's ever come up with. Because pressure-treated lumber, if you leave it out in the rain, gets wet and soaks up moisture. So if you don't have a break here, you're still gonna get moisture coming from the ground through your concrete and into your wood. If this gets wet, it won't rot, but if this gets wet, this also gets wet. And this one's not pressure-treated. So that's just dumb. So if you're gonna build, got two options. Use pressure-treated blocks and put your walls on top of that. So you adjust for another 1.5 inches when you're cutting your studs. Or if it's dry, you can go right on the concrete, but you always use vapor barrier protection. You just slide her into place. All right. We should have just enough room up there that even though we're lifting and it's actually longer when you're getting near the top, because we cut it short on purpose, we end up with a superior product. Now, one other thing we want to know before we get going any further. Is my foundation wall straight? Is it kicked out? Is it burnt coming in? Because in order to build and level a wall, we want to know which direction it's going. Because if it's leaning out, then what we're going to do is we're going to measure 3.5 inches from the bottom. We're going to chalk a line. If it's leaning in, we'll measure 3.5 inches from the top and chalk a line. And that way we can guarantee that we're going to have a level wall from end to end when we're building. So in this case, it's actually leaning out just a touch. Okay, because it's leaning out a little bit, we're gonna go tight on the bottom, and that is going to be my starting point. I'm just gonna throw one nail in over here into that other 2x4, and that'll hold my wall from falling over. Just so nothing comes crashing down on my head. I'm gonna set it with the head sticking out so it's easy to find later, okay? Now, it turns out that I get lucky on this one because my last frame, that's 16 on center, also ends pretty much where the end of this is, where the window opening is. It's important to know the end from the beginning when you're framing so that you don't do silly things and make mistakes, but the cutout in the foundation, that's what you want to frame to. You want to frame flush or even a little bit bigger than that. All of these windows are going to get replaced eventually because right now it's a window installed inside of an old window frame. And I hate that. It's a bad assembly. It makes things wet. So what we're going to do, when the new window comes in, we're going to have it measured. There'll be a gap on the side and on the bottom, and then we'll have a jamb extension custom made to come right out to where our finished wall is. And so then that gap between the jamb extension and the framing becomes spray foamed. That's it. Nice and simple. So if your frame is too far back, you're going to be using a whole lot of foam, and then you're not going to have the proper backing for your drywall. So all you do is measure within an inch of the edge of your cutout, one way or the other, and then you can let spray foam be the balance of your assembly. We're going to keep the top plate, okay, because we have a 1.5 inch sill plate and then the window. So that'll be fine, it won't be in the way. My next wall is another 8-foot section, and this is where a laser level comes in handy. When you're working alone, man, this is like having an extra helper on the job. We're going to put our laser right on the edge of that 2x4. Here we go. And then we're going to mark it just so you can visualize, okay? That's my first stud of the next wall plate, right there. So then you can then take your tape measure, put it in the foam, and go here. See, there's another stud there. There's my red square. So now when I'm thinking about marking out my plates, I'm gonna have a shorter half wall here, and then I've gotta have this stud here, even though I want another one here as well, because that's my concrete right here. All right, so I'm gonna put this stud in, but I'm gonna add this stud as well, because I wanna have framing around my windows properly. This is in case the drywall. So this is back framing. This is additional framing. This is structural framing for my drywall system, okay? So the way we do this one is we're gonna go top and bottom plate again. We're gonna put this 2x4 and this 2x4 in. We're doing the same measuring system as this. So we start with a stud and we finish with an empty cavity. So my next stud is gonna be right here. So we got every 16 inches we want a stud. So no matter where we start and finish drywall, it lands in the middle of one of these sections, okay? This is the key. There we go. Now, we also have sticks here. This is what we want it to finish like. This is about the same height as that concrete. These are 48s. There's one goes here, one goes here, one goes here. Let's get those numbers on the bottom plate as well. And they're every 16 inches. Nice and simple. One of the benefits of having a system, especially when you're doing basements, you're gonna be dealing with cutting around ductwork, unique scenarios, plumbing things that are weird. And having a system that allows you to make these adjustments and measuring back and forth, just 16 on center all the time, that's where success is. Here we go. Let's lift up our wall. We'll slide it into place. There we go. Huh. My measurement was just a little bit off, or something here was twisted. Yeah, that's warped. Okay, that's not gonna be a problem. Again, we don't want to attach it to the floor yet if we can get away with it, okay? My stud there is warped. Problem solved. Again, leave it sticking out a fair amount, okay? And then over here, I'm gonna also attach these two pieces of plate together. Now, we gotta finish off the rest of this wall into a corner. Okay, beautiful. All right, guys, so when I have a wall, I can just drive a screw right through. So I pretty much start where the stud meets the plate, and I'm on a 45-degree angle. What I'm getting is I'm getting the two plates connecting like that, okay? Now it's just temporary because that's not how we attach it to the floor, but maybe what we can do, Matt, is we can confirm our line with a little bit of chalk here. We're just kind of visually checking to see if our wall is somewhat straight. Yeah, that's not terrible. I'm just having a quick look with that string line. Just checking it against the frame to make sure there isn't a big bow in the wall or something. Because when you're following your foundation, as long as they poured it somewhat straight, you're okay here. It's okay if there's little spaces of air gap in between this and this insulation. Air is actually an insulator. That's how fiberglass works. It traps air. So if you are a little out of level as far as the board relative to the wall, don't worry. Get your wall level. That's more important, all right? Now we got a powder actuated nailer here. I'm using a 3.5, is it a 3 or 2 inch? 2 inch spike. And the reason I'm only using a 2 inch is because I'm going through 1.5 inches of material, but it blows right through the top with this yellow nail. I got a wall plate here, so I'm gonna go right to the middle of it. That's set down, okay? It goes even further down, and all you do is pull the trigger, okay? 22 caliber, collect your brass. And we don't need a lot of them. We need one at each end of the plate and maybe one in the middle. And honestly, all that is doing is providing us stability from lateral movement. Okay? Eyes on your round to make sure that it's in there properly. Close it, press it, trigger. Collect your brass. If you don't make sure that you're collecting your brass, you could have one left in there, in the chamber. That creates a dangerous scenario, okay? For every shot, you stop, you make sure you clean your gun out. It's a 22 caliber round, it's not a joke. If you don't want to have explosives in your house, you can just buy concrete nails. You can buy a 2 or 3 inch concrete spike, and you can just hammer through the wood right into the concrete. Won't be a problem. I just like having toys. Get my ears back. Now, for the rest of this, it's a little bit simpler. Now we get to pull out our laser level. You'll see on your laser level, there's a yellow line here. That represents where the laser line is going to be drawn. So if I take another 2x4, now to get the same height, I got a piece of sill gasket here, put on my vertical line, and I'm going to set my little yellow line right on my gap between these two, and then shoot it down the wall. And what I'm looking for is I'm looking at the bottom where I'm a 1/2 inch out, and up top, okay? And it's okay that it's not the same, but what you want is the bottom and the top having the same gap to the line. Really, really hard with wood to get one perfect line all the way around, because any bow in the wood is going to interrupt the trajectory of that, right? So now I've got a 1/2 inch gap at the bottom, so I'm going to throw in my screw, 1/2 inch gap from the top. I'm going to set that back. Before I drive it all the way in, I can confirm with my level. Oh, sexy. Okay, there we go. Now, don't sink the head, because if you sink the head, you're going to start lifting the wall. Remember that gap that we have that's continuous. We don't care about it. We don't need to shim it. We don't need to do anything fancy. We're simply supporting drywall. That is solid as a rock. If you're worried about the strength of the scenario, you can add a screw for every joist. Remember, electricians and plumbers don't drill through the joist. So wherever you put one screw into a joist, you're perfectly safe to do so. So now I want to put a screw up here, okay? Let's go a little more dramatic. We'll go right over here. So look at my gap now. Now I'm about 3/8 of an inch. I'm not a 1/2 inch anymore. So now I'm going to check up here. Well, actually that's pretty good. That was my temporary screw. I might have just got lucky. Let's have a look. Nope, it has to come in just a little bit. All right. If you're going to be trying to be perfect, then invest in perfection. Take the time. There we go. And we'll come over here. That one's blown in. This one has to come out a little bit. I am now just a little bit less than 1/4. My gap up here is too big. Okay, now, how do I make that gap bigger? Leverage. Okay. Oh boy, oh boy.
Hold on, I'll give you a hand.
No, I gotta undo my screw over here. That little screw is causing me all that stress. There we go. Now she almost wants to sit perfectly level where we were. Now that's exactly where I want to be, at the 1/4 mark. So I can create a little bit of tension here. I got a bug piece of wood interrupting my line. Okay, I'm actually out just a little bit, and this is good because it gets a chance to learn something. Once you've drilled a hole, you can't make a minor adjustment, because the tip of that screw is going to find the old hole and pull it right back into position. So what you want to do is you want to start a new hole, make a mark where the old line was, take the screw out. I'm making a really minor adjustment. And I'm going to just use my finger here to get that other 1/16 of an inch. Perfect. Then all we got to do is go down to this corner. We're done with this for now. Save this assembly for later. And now we can use the box beam. The laser was just to help from across the room. We're what, 16, 17 feet? A 17-foot span with a wall plate that's nice and straight. Drop a laser line, hit the far end, make sure that corner's perfect. And then you can just work your way back across. Now, here we go. Now that is gorgeous. Oh, come on, let's double check again. If you slip off your screw, re-level. Guarantee everything moved. All right, now this is a separate top plate. So again, I want to screw the left and right side of everything. Just don't bury your head, like I said. Now that corner is nice and solid. This is all solid. We're good to go. Okay, so I'm a little vertically challenged here. Matt, you're gonna give me a hand? Now here's our strapping. Now, I did a video a couple years ago, we did a basement together, but they already had all the walls framed, so we didn't get a chance to show you how to frame them. But we did make a video about why we always strap our ceilings. And this is because it has all kinds of benefits. One of them being, I have now a nailing surface for my top plate. So I'm gonna leave about 1/8 of an inch off the wall, okay? There we go. We're gonna just measure and mark for the rest of the straps. We can finish nailing that all in later. There we go. Because this plate here is perfectly level, I can tack the bottom, and then all I simply have to do is level this corner going into that 1x3. That's now contact with the top plate, so I know that's level. And then I'm just gonna come over here, there we are, That is my spot. There we go. This solves all of your basement problems. You've got a thermal break in behind all your framing, so you're not gonna have a cold corner. You're not gonna have a hidden corner. You can drill through the plate here and run your wire out the backside and still have the required depth for code. You don't need to put protection plates on. Remember, drywall screws come 1.25 inches. So as long as your hole is 1.25 inches of wood before the hole, your wire will never get touched because the drywall is also 1/2 inch. Last thing about the system, thank you, Matt, you need back framing, okay? Back framing is considered drywall. So you have a sheet of drywall. Oh, there's nowhere to screw the drywall to over here. That'd be a weak corner. What we're gonna do is we're gonna add, this is like 4 feet, right? This represents the height of a sheet of drywall. Drywall, we put a screw in the bottom, one here, one in the middle, one here, and one on the top. With that in mind, you put this piece of wood, a 3-foot piece, tight up against that other 2x4 in the back. Because it's 1x3, it's sticking out now, all right? And I can secure it just below the screw line and just above the screw line. Now I got a drywall backer. When you're framing, you frame clockwise. When you drywall clockwise. You're always solving every problem as it comes up. So now I got a I got a drywall backer, and then after that drywall is installed, I still got 3/4 inch of this stud showing for the next sheet. Good and good. Same with this piece. Let's get this set up for success now. Back framing. Always pull that gap nice and tight. Okay, you set the screw, you get to a certain point, it'll push away, and then you just keep drilling until it closes up. Now you're good to go. You see this big gap up here? All right, now you've got access so that your electrician or yourself can run wires up to your wall plugs in the next floor. If your upstairs is all wired and you're doing your basement and you don't care about access, that's fine. Do the strapping first anyway, because it gives you something to attach to. Or you're gonna have to build your wall another 2 inches out, and nobody wants to give up that space. All right, so we're here in the bathroom now, and we're gonna deal with our outside wall. And this is a little non-traditional, but if you're doing it like we did and you used your wall framing in order to control your floor leveling, then this is how you deal with all this mess. First of all, we need to identify framing for the window. So I'm gonna do that with a laser level. And so I'm marking my bottom plate, and I'm making all of these marks so that I can then lift the plate, translate it to the top plate, build the wall, and then bring it back into position, okay? The other thing I need is my 16 on center. And the reason I want that is because of the thermal issue. I want to have a complete batt right here. Okay, so I'm gonna mark my 16. Come on, do your job. Here we go. 16 inch. And then from that point, run the rest of these across here. Mark my 16s. All right, there we go. Remember, the end goal here is to have a perfect thermal break in the wall. So we want to have every 16 all across the room. And then what we do is called back framing. We'll go back with 1x3s and create opportunities for the drywall to have something to attach to. That's a separate issue. That's my location for this stud. Boom, boom, my location for this stud. And then I'm finishing up with a stud really near the edge of the shower. So that gives me a lot of surface there to attach my backer board. We're gonna finish this house a little bit different. You'll notice the old house, they finished up tight here, right to the ceiling. And I don't like that, because then I can't put casings, and I hate just drywall returns to windows. So what I'm doing is I'm leaving this frame in here so I can come back to the new window that's gonna go in. And then we can actually have a space here for a casing. See, I like this. On this side of the house, look how much taller the windows are. There's no reason I can't have that height over there. So I don't know why they built it different on one side of the house or the other. I know that this side is brick, so maybe they have a lintel, and maybe they've done a different kind of header structural structure over here. I don't know. Hey. This is gonna be a shower, so what we wanna do is set this wall perfectly level so that when we're done, we don't have to do any wet shimming with our shower boards. Might as well try to make this perfect. Nice and tight. And this one, actually, it is perfect. Okay. All right. Good for you. Positive. Booyah. Okay. All right. Now, we have a couple things to consider. we're gonna be framing our two sidewalls. So we wanna be able to consider where our shower valve is gonna go. We're gonna be able to consider that this is venting, and that's gonna go up into that ceiling. I think we should throw a laser on that. Either way, I got almost 3 inches on the inside of this joist. And the pipe itself is what, a 2-inch pipe in OD? Yeah, okay, so we're good. So that means our venting will go up inside that chase and come across, and it can go to the rest of the house. We're good. Boom and boom. Now, this still has to be blown on the floor. Okay. So go ahead and do that. Yeah, so this is a rare scenario where we're gonna go ahead a step. Knowing the construction process, because I don't need any electrical in a shower wall, and the bathroom is on a separate circuit anyway, and this side of the wall is going to be all wall-to-wall closets built-ins. So there's no plugs going along here. There's no reason for an electrician to have access to this cavity to run a wire. So if we add our insulation first with a couple of cross blocks, then we can then frame our wall, slide it right in, tie it together. Life is good. Brilliant. All right, go ahead, blow things up. When you're framing a round ductwork, just because it has the flexibility, your goal isn't to go tight to it, because metal transfers sound and so does wood. So if you make contact, all of a sudden, whoever's in here singing in the shower is going to be heard up in the living room across the house, right? That's not a good thing. So we're going to keep the wall strong, while at the same time, instead of framing to 79, we're going to frame to like 77 and leave room to stick some of our sound insulation in between the two materials, okay? Okay, that's all we're going to do. When this wall is built, it'll be a top and bottom plate. So the plate will come over, we can throw it in here. We don't have to attach to the wall here. But as we get more towards the middle, I want to just create something stronger here because this board is a little warped. I'll tighten it in, and then I can have a midpoint to make contact so that my framing and waterproofing joints and everything, nothing's moving around. We really want to have, like, especially for tile, 4 points of contact. Top, here, here, and the bottom, all right? Super important. So I'm out of pink, doesn't matter. I had some rock sulfur and run the project. Love to hear from you guys, if you're builders, what product you prefer. I'm a big fan of the pink just because this stuff is a real pain in the butt to work with when you're cutting it. All right, now this is my block, because when I build my wall, it's gonna come over here like this. And I wanna have somewhere to make that connection and not just on a funky angle. All right, I want it to be really, really solid. I'm gonna be able to do something here at the bottom. Here we go. We're just gonna build 2 boxes. One for each end. Because it's a bathroom, I'm gonna actually be putting the Roxol Safe and Sound insulation in the wall. Maybe a little overkill because there's gonna be a closet in front of it, but there we go. And on the plate first, there we go. Now right about now, some of you who are really keen and watch the show a lot know, hey Jeff, wait a second. What are you doing here for your vapor barrier? Because you're in Ontario, and our building code requires a continuous vapor seal. And that's simple. What I'm gonna do, that's where it's gonna go, okay? I don't have to have it here now. I can kick this off a couple millimeters, attach it to my top, attach to the bottom plate, leave it disengaged here. All I'm gonna do is start the 3 screws as a gentle reminder for later on. And then we'll feed the plastic in behind when we do the rest of our vapor barrier, and then we'll be able to pull it nice and tight. Because there's screws, even if there's a little bit of a gap between these 2 pieces of wood, the threads hold everything in place from moving around independently, which will protect my gaps in my shower. I'm not worried about that. Okay, so this is a great way to just kind of get her done. Hit that plate, boom. There's my first connection, and then my second connection. That's the one. Oh, okay. All right, there you go. There we go, we got a wall. All right, now we've got it anchored to the top, no problem. Space to put insulation in here so we don't transfer sound from the wall, wood into the metal. 16-inch, blah, blah, blah. There's my shower. Here's where my transition is, and I'm gonna have hardware with a sliding door. I don't have the specs on me, but I'm doing a 32-inch shower. That's 32 to this edge right here, but I haven't put my backer and my tile. So let's cut this, Matt. Yep. We'll double up so we got framing to receive the hardware for the door kit. Yeah. And get that in the corner. There we go. So here's what I want to do.
Yep.
I want to build this one like a temp wall. And what that means for you guys is we're going to put a 2x4 across the top. Just like when we're doing structural work, like we did upstairs in the house. We'll build this section of wall up to the ductwork. And then we're going to come over here, and the trick here is this pipe is actually our main sewer for the whole home. So it's going to go up into the ceiling space because we're going to bring our drywall right across to the ceiling. It's going to go up into this cavity and then go pick up the other bathroom. So we have to be mindful of where this pipe is going and not to put any blocking there. So here's the thinking when you're framing your plumbing, guys. This is my center line for my drain, okay? Now, the drain can be cut. That's why the reason the box, it's actually open way down here to bring the drain in line with our center line. So what I want to do is I want to give myself about 10 inches on each side of that center line so that my valve is in the middle and there's lots of room for the PEX plumbing. I know it's expansion PEX, but it's still nice to not have too much going on in the middle. Remember, we can go with 24-inch on center framing. So in this case, I have a 20-inch cavity with frame on each side, and that's lots of room to work with mounting your plumbing. That's our frame, and I'm gonna want a piece right here as well. Same thing, leave some room for that vapor barrier down the road. If that's as big a box that I'm making, that means I'm going 28 inches from here. I need my strapping right there, Matt. Beautiful. Let's do this. Up and over. Hey, that is sweet, eh? Let's double tap that sucker. Okay, got it?
Right there, actually.
Beautiful. Okay?
Yeah. Nice.
All right. I'm liking that. Give me 3 of them. 74 and 7/8 times 1, 2, 3. Fire in the hole. You get yourself a 32-inch tub. They have this huge side on it, and you really only have like a 26-inch shower. This is gonna be great. I'm gonna move my frame out here a little bit more. We're gonna have to do some cross bracing here so that we have locations to pick up our other hardware for this side of the door. Other than that, I think we're in good shape. I will add the bracing, back framing, after the plumbers have come and gone. Some things you're better to just leave a rough frame and then do the back framing later. All right, so in the last section of this video, guys, we're gonna deal with framing the door area. And ultimately, doors in a basement can be really tricky because the older the house, the shorter the ceiling. We still have a fire code that we have to pass. We've gotta have a 78-inch hole when the door is open to walk through, okay? So that means if the door is 78 and it's framed with 1/8 of an inch at the top and usually a 1/2 inch or so at the bottom, you're a 79-inch space. Well, that's nice. So we need, let's call it a 79-inch frame. That's the hole plus the jamb makes it almost 80, right? From my plate to my beam, I'm 80 3/4. Okay, so I've got room for the door. Now when I cut the plate out for the door area, I have to consider my flooring here because I'm actually quite tight. This is a leveler that we poured, and if you didn't see that video, go check it out, it'll change your world. We're gonna add a dimpled membrane, uncoupling membrane on this, and then tile. And it ends up finishing about the same height as this current plate. So I gotta use this as my reference to measure. So I got 80 3/4. All right, that's a little tight, but that's fine. I can buy a door stock off the shelf, slide it into place. I'm only gonna be framing left and right sides, just the Jackson Kings. There's no headers added here. But there's one other thing to consider. I got my ductwork inside this room. There's a few tricks that we can use in a renovation project to deal with ductwork. We can actually change the entire duct. We can make it wider and skinnier, as long as it has the same, total surface area. Cubic feet per minute is what we're looking at here. So we could take the time and we could change out the ducts and we could lift them up a couple inches and make them a little wider. But the truth is, because we're using this as our plumbing space, okay, we don't really have a lot of extra room to work with. And we're actually pretty close. So I hung up my laser line and I'm like checking near the bottom of this ductwork. You can see the line on my hand. If I measure up to that line, I am actually 78 1/4. Now that is a little bit scary because I don't have a ceiling yet. Sorry, 79 1/4. All right, and that gives me the room to actually put in a ceiling, but only here. Now the ductwork is not flat, it's manufactured, but if I force it up, so right above this plate, I can force it and lock it into a position that gives me the clearance that I need for my door swing. But I'm literally gonna have drywall right underneath this, and the door is going to pass within a 1/4 inch of that bulkhead. It is going to be a little bit wonky. That's my basement. Wonky, right? You're going to get what you're going to get. More important than the ceiling issues are the flooring issues. You want your flooring to be perfect. You want your tile not to crack. You want everything level. You don't want dips and valleys. So adding the leveler, even though we lost a little height, made some sense. Now we're just going to stick all this stuff in. This was set up to be my point load for my big beam in the upstairs. It's actually not beefed out the right dimension. So I'm going to put 2 more pieces of stick here, Matt. All right, we're just going to stick them on one at a time, tack them in place, and then that'll represent the door frame for there. We'll measure over, and we'll stick another double to be at the other side of the door frame. Nice and simple. There we are. You want to switch up your nailing pattern. So this one I started at like 3 inches from the top. This one I'm going to start 6 inches from the top. So I'm moving my spacing around. Less likelihood I'm going to hit other nails and run into problems with I got a misfire. All we got to do is measure across for the whole of our door. That's my outside wall. I'm gonna have a vanity. Even if the vanity is 24 inches, I'll measure up here, I can make a mark. Even if I got a 24-inch vanity plus 1/2 inch drywall, plus a 1-inch overhang on my counter, I got room here for a 35-inch door. That's more than plenty. So let's, instead of going with a 28, let's go with I mean, we could do a 28, but it's got a window. We can leave the door open. We can get the light in here. Well, let's go to 30. Okay, so that's a 30-inch door. I'm going to frame a 32-inch hole because I want to leave room for the door jamb material plus door jamb material plus a little bit of room in case I'm not perfectly level. Knowing the way I frame, I'll need the space. So let me just throw a little cross line on that. And I'm going to see if my stack of wood is somewhat level. Yeah, that's not terrible. That's pretty close. We'll be fine with that. All right. One thing I know is when you're nailing on an angle, the wood is going to move about a 1/4 inch. The first nail. We're going to start a little proud here. There we go. It sets back in position. Okay. Now, lumber has a warp. When you're going to double up, if you have a warp this way, flip it around and get the warp going the other way. Okay, and that'll help keep them both nice and square. And do yourself a favor. Nail from inside the door area. Pinch them together on an angle. So hopefully the tips don't stick out the other side. Remember, this is 3 inches. Nails are 3 1/4. All right, go ahead. See if we can tack this in the right spot, give or take.
Perfect.
All right, there we go. Now, and of course, we're using galvanized nails because we are coming in contact with a pressure-treated bottom and veneer lumber, which again is pressure-treated. There we go. That's the door. Piece of cake, right? Now, the only thing you got to consider here now is because it's a long wall and it's all going to be drywalled, and the top is going to be continuous. We want to have an idea where our 16 on center is. I got a whack of wood here. I've got a doorway. I got lots of confusion. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to run my tape all the way down from the original wall, and that's going to get me where my red squares go. So that's next thing we do is mark that out. And the reason you want that is so that when they come to drywall, we're going to start in the corner and we'll just work our way down the whole wall. We'll always finish a sheet on a stud. Here we go. So I'm going to work off this. Because we did the structural wall first, we don't have the ability to mark the top and bottom plates. So we're just going to mark the tops and then use our level to transfer the lines. So there's a 32. I'm just going to find my square all along the whole basement. And this is one technique that you can use so you can install your drywall perfect. Remember, knowing the end from the beginning. When you know what everybody else in the trades is going to be doing, you can make plans, okay? And then we'll fill the rest of this section up doing the same thing on these 16s. Now that we got that, we can go back and put our studs where we want them. I'm going to stick this one in place. These battery powered tools are heavier than you're like. There we have it. Now the only thing I need to consider now is back framing. So once we pass our framing inspection, we'll come back, we'll put some 1x4s on the back of this. So we have a drywall connection. So there's a little surface here to screw drywall to. But other than that, this bathroom's ready to close. Hopefully this video was helpful. Don't forget, we have a membership program, guys. So if you're gonna take a project this big in scope at your house, consider joining the membership program. We have a Discord. You can send me pictures, and then I can help diagnose situations that you're dealing with that are gonna get a little wonky. Because trust me, basements can get a little wonky. Cheers till next time. And we'll measure this sucker out.
Okay.
Right?
Right.
Right? What then?